In a Jewish family, you know, maybe you're going to get a rabbi, a doctor, a lawyer, or a socialist, okay? And our family my grandfather happened to be the last because he never went to school. When he came to the U.S., his name was, and I don't know where the name came from, was Israel Arian. He was probably from 1910 to 1920, probably part of that movement, the Wobbly movement, ILWU, sort of pro-socialist. My dad, I never met him, but my dad would tell me that down in Pershing Square, he'd get up and, soapbox and say whatever he was going to say. And he struggled for those things. My dad told me that he feels like things skip a generation because my dad and his family, maybe because of my granddad, sort of went, they didn't like the exposure. And they said, Dave, the first time I heard you speak, it reminded me of my father. So that was it. But on the mother's side, my mother's side, they ended up coming over here and ended up in the Chicago area. And my mother and her sister moved out here when they were in their teens. And she was always a social progressive. I don't know why. I don't know where she got her thinking from. But the example was back in the 50s, they were exploding the atomic bomb above ground in Nevada. And a number of women, including my mother, went there, and I think it became called the Women's Strike for Peace. But they went there to try to expose it and stop it. So I think a lot of this was passed on to me without knowing about it. It was just something the family did. My brother was always active. My sister was active. I think I'm 17 years old. My sister's 19. She says, hey, Dave, we're going to Torrance. I said, what are we going over there for? Just come on, let's go. So we go over there, and I think it was Del Webb was building houses in Torrance at the time. And there was one house that they showed to everybody. And I think it said, no blacks or Mexicans need apply. So there was going to be a protest by the NAACP. And so there's 8 of us, and one of them turns out to be General Gravitt, the Gravitt family. So we go there, we set up pickets, and I don't know too much about it, but my sister, was heavy into it. And, they start calling us all kinds of names of construction workers and throwing shit at us. So that was sort of my first experience in politics and the political movement. The 50s was a McCarthy era, and the 60s were like, with the anti-war movement and the civil rights movement, or really the free speech movement, it was sort of like the breaking out culturally. It was a cultural movement and a political movement at the same time. Not so much an economic movement. It was about freedom, rights. So here in San Pedro, we organized what we call the Community Action Center, the CAC. And we started on 12th Street in a little house. Then my brother bought a place on between 18th and 19th on Cabrillo. And we used to get about 200 kids coming in from San Pedro High, Mary Star, and others, talking about social issues, not only the war, because of the draft, the average American youth didn't really want to go to that war. He didn't really believe in that war. He wasn't political, but he didn't believe in it. He didn't want to go. So we did draft counseling. We did a whole lot of things. We were involved in all the civil rights activities. Me and my sister were arrested the first time in 1965 when Martin Luther King marched on Selma down at the Federal Building. We got arrested in support of that with 104 other people. Here in San Pedro with the Community Action Center, it was a different thing. It was, you had the car clubs who was down here on 6th and 7th Street, and they were sort of the, at that time, the straight-laced, middle of the road San Pedro dudes, The surfers were a little bit easier to deal with here in San Pedro because they were looking for alternatives to the other stuff that was going on. So when we formed this Community Action Center, it became very controversial in San Pedro. And the Community Action Center got attacked by the car clubs and others. So they came to confront us. And we had already set up a defense system. And so I called my dad and some other longshoremen up. And all the car clubs came out front. And there must have been about 100 of them, 100 guys. And we had put the call out, and my dad brought down about 20 longshoremen. And we backed them down. 2 days later, they burnt the center down. The same guys who burnt the center down, and I can name them right now, I was working with 2 years later on the waterfront, and we became friends and stuff like that.